Hello, welcome to the AP7 podcast. You are here with Rachel Donovan and the founder of AP7, Mr. George Helou.
Thanks, Rachel, and thank you for joining us. We love talking about how to get the heart into everything we do to get a lot out of life.
Whether it be relationships, business, careers, you name it. So, let's get started. So, George, we've got another fantastic topic today.
Yeah. You know how they say you should never give up?
Yes, I've heard that once or twice.
Well, it's easier said than done.
That's right.
Also, it can be very destructive because you get a lot of people who they don't give up, but they don't get any wins and they get drained and disillusioned. But hey, Rachel, they're not allowed to give up because they're not that kind of person that gives up. And it actually gets pretty scary how much damage it can do to be doing something over and over and not getting results.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to look at with this discussion is why keep going, or what are we really giving up?
Yeah. Well, of course, life is challenging, so we have to be resilient. And if you give up prematurely, you'll never really achieve anything of substance. So obviously there's something about how we go about achieving things in our lives that we have to be resourced and skilled to deal with obstacles, challenges, setbacks, failures. But I like to explain it this way. If someone punches you and you fall, you got to get back up. But if they punch you again and you fall, okay, fine, you're resilient, you've gotten back up yet again. But how many times are you going to get punched before you decide to get up differently so that they can't punch you again? And then what about what choices you're going to make so that you're in a different situation where punches aren't thrown in the first place? So I'm a big believer that we should never give up, but there are conditions to this. And I'd like to explore that with you.
Yes, definitely. Because I think we hear it so often about never giving up, and it's more of us, I guess, how we feel about if we think that we've given up on something that causes us to follow through with things maybe we really don't want to anymore, and we don't want to be seen as weak, and you know, how we can really evaluate for ourselves what is the right decision for us.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to not give up on anything, I guess you really got to make sure that it matters that much to you in the first place. So how do you know what you're doing is so important to you that you can't afford to give up? Because if you gave up on that, your heart, the emptiness, the loss of purpose, like it would be devastating. I think it really does need to be that important. But if you can easily imagine your life without it, then you have to reevaluate why you would bother. And if you can imagine your life without it, but you definitely want it in your life, then you got to make sure that you put enough meaning into achieving it that now it's going to get the best of you. Like you're going to put a lot into it. All of you into it. I think that all in other words, if you want to achieve something, you got to go all in. But what does all in really mean? Well, we're not saying compromise your health because you don't have time to eat and you don't have time to sleep. That's not all in. That's all dumb. All in is that your attention, your innovation to be resourceful, your passion to give it as much as you can and be ready to change direction for it if something's not working. That's all in. So to never give up is to have that attitude of I'm all in. But there are times when giving up is probably a good idea. So in other words, we can't afford to create an identity that is fully entangled in the success of one thing, the achievement of something. Because if we do that to ourselves, what are we doing, Rach? Like, are we saying, I'm worth nothing without achieving that? That's a pretty bad insult on who you really are, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's why I guess you wouldn't want to give up, because you don't want to think of yourself like that.
Yeah, suddenly you are just a failure. You amount to nothing because you gave up. I don't think that's clever to be hoodwinked into a relationship with anything, a partner, a career, and to have that level of dysfunctional relationship, you know? So if I would give up on something, if every time I invited the best of me to engage it, the environment didn't seem to want to respond at all. So in other words, relationships, people, whatever. Because what are you really giving up on at the end of the day? You're giving up on a lack of respect. You're giving up on a lack of reciprocation. You're giving up on the invitation for you to be a doormat, a giver, without receiving in kind. So yeah, there are times, and we can use the example of a relationship, that giving up is healthy because you definitely had given them every reason to want to meet you in a better place, and they refuse to go to that party where everybody wins. But let's go to what is it we're giving up on. I think fundamentally, in the process of achieving anything, you have to give up on the approach or aspects of the approach. That's what you should always be giving up if it's not giving you what you need. And I'm not saying rush into giving up on it. Like, you have to critically look at why it's not working. Is it a circumstance? Is it timing? Is it you've misjudged what people value? Yeah. Look closely, because maybe your approach is just needs to be delayed by a second or sped up by a second or raise the volume, or, you know, it could be that simple. But you have to be willing to change your approach as you get the first, second, or third fail happening. And I think that if we do that, then we never have to give up, because we're always finding a better way to try, and then we may make some progress, or we completely achieve what we wanted just by tweaking the approach, right? But I see a lot of people get exhausted because they don't realize their approach is the problem, and they're not allowed to give up.
So as in they keep doing the same thing repeatedly as well?
Yeah. Well, they don't realize that they're the problem. They just assume that they're having a go. Why isn't the world responding? Why isn't that person, that situation working out? And with everything that I've come to understand about our actions, we are always the problem, including if someone else is distasteful, disrespectful, distrusting in the way they behave. We are the problem if we ignore that behavior. We are the problem. Because yes, some people will do wrong by you, but how many times are you going to allow that before you say, oh, you've hit my dignity spot. You've exhausted the tolerance. I now give you a big graceful bow. It's over. So I believe that if you look at a situation where your approach is not bringing a response that works, and you actually discuss what's going on. In other words, you're changing your approach. You're trying to be a critical thinker, a problem solver, and that person's not responding in kind, then you can start to realize that you're not giving up on them. you're just giving up on the abuse. You're just giving up on a relationship, because this is a good example, but I want to cross over to other examples too, like career or inventing something, or business. But let's just stick to this relationship thing for a sec. So yeah, you're not giving up on having a meaningful relationship. You're just giving up on the illusion that that person is ready, willing, and able to create a relationship with you that's meaningful and worth the investment. See, it seems to be all about the context of the situation. What are you really giving up on? Because I know a lot of people feel like failures because they're giving up on a relationship that had so much confirmation bias. Like they were so twisted with their perception to have to believe that glimmer of hope every third day for about 11 seconds of that person being sweet, or every fourth day of between abuse, they were love bombed long enough to be reminded of what's possible. But you know what I think? I think that every moment is so precious because you can unpack the truth of what's real. And if you just stick from moment to what's real, then you can start to feel grounded enough to know what's really going on versus what you hope was true. And you want to be true, but it isn't there. And it looks like it's going to be, it's gone again. It isn't there. You see what I mean? And so eventually you want to say, I have some statistical analysis going on. It turns out in the last 30,000 moments, you have disrespected me for 23,000 of them, give or take 2. You see what I mean? And I'm making fun of the analysis of it, but just to show you that we're not grounded enough generally in the reality of how we're approaching it and what's coming back.
So why do you think we're not grounded in this approach?
Because we're afraid of the truth, because the truth is scary. That person is not the one, and we can't afford them not to be the one because we don't want to be lonely. We just can't afford that. It's just too scary because there's only either one soulmate or maybe a handful of partners that could be right for us in the world, and the others are probably in other countries. So I've got to make this work. And look at that beautiful person's qualities. I mean, they're such a nice person, Rachel. They're so nice. You see, we do that. It's like, yeah, they are nice, but they just don't care enough to reciprocate for you. So that's an example. I think that's a very classic example of never giving up. But what are you really giving up? So I'm saying how to not give up on the things that matter. Isn't that the actual context? How to not give up on the things that matter, which is your heart being truly satisfied and you giving the best of you to your environment and creating a beautiful, sustainable, reciprocating relationship. Don't ever, ever give up on having that in your life. And then if you go to look at another area, it would be believing that you could also express that in a business or a career where you can give so much value. The reciprocation is good money, promotions, or a business that grows really wonderfully and you get to have a beautiful lifestyle and whatever. Those sorts of things. You should never, ever give up on that. And by you knowing that you are designed to have infinite variations of an approach, and you've got the intuition and the creativity to match approach to an outcome that you want to attract back, that's the game. And that's why when we talk about how to never give up is to know exactly what's non-negotiable to never give up on, which is you your heart's needs, the fact that you're capable. Never give up on believing you're capable. Never give up on believing you're worthy and deserving. Never give up on the truth that you're not perfect and you always need to challenge yourself and be humble and change. Never give up on those things because they will give you the ability to come at anything. And then whatever doesn't work, you don't have to give up on that because you're putting your A game on of changing and being better. And you know what? We're talking about an approach that creates extraordinary outcomes. And most people are not given that level of commitment, that level of innovation, in the way they're approached. Like, for example, let's look at a business scenario. If there's a manager and they have an employee that they're managing come to them and they're failing at something, and the manager looks at them and witnesses this person humble, eager to look at how to be different, and then goes off and is resourceful and Googles in their own time how to come at something differently, comes back, does it, reports to the manager, their conversion rate is improved from, 10% to 40%. They then create a memo and links to the things they use to improve their conversion rate, and they share it with all their teammates. Like, what does a manager do with someone like that? They're going to be given more leads. They're going to be trusted with more responsibility. And that manager is going to recommend them to replace him or her. But someone like that will probably even end up being poached and given more responsibilities. But what I just played out is so tangible and real. It reminds me of that podcast we did on how to create a purposeful career.
Yeah.
And I definitely recommend we link that for anyone who's liking exploring that whole scenario of, being different in a workplace and adding so much value. You give yourself a chance to get promoted or start furthering your career. Anyway, so see what's missing in this world? There's too much ordinary. And we all compete. We end up jealousy, envy, anxiety, depression. These things all play out when we're not being extraordinary, when we're not digging deep and finding the abundance of being there for each other in so many great ways. Eventually, we're in lack and we only see what we don't have. Mm-hmm. And we live in the shadow of that, and it doesn't bring out the best in us at all. Yeah. And we end up being oversensitive and everything like that. So here we are. Apparently, we're not allowed to give up, but look at the toxic environment we're thrown in, and we're raised to feel like that's the only life we have. So every person that's ever achieved anything great had that attitude that they can't afford to give up. It's not an option. And, never giving up means there's only a couple of things that could stop you. Death or some crazy disability. Yeah? Or a major shift in priorities because suddenly your family hit a crisis and you had to give up something, maybe temporarily, maybe indefinitely, but because your priority was for your family or, something, that you gave it your all because that was core to what your heart wanted. And then once you live through that, guess what? The person that you are will never be short of the rewards that will come from that anyway, right? So very small reasons why you'd have to give up anything.
And so what about people that hold the attitude of not wanting to give up, but they're fighting for something that doesn't make their heart sing anymore?
Yeah.
Or that they seem to look bad, that they gave up on that dream they always spoke about. And
it depends on whether they really wanted it, but their low confidence made them not give the best of themselves to it. And now they're stuck between a rock and hard place. They've blunted their approach and now they're forcing their heart not to want it anymore. And the brain can do that. The brain can actually start to dream smaller. Doesn't help the heart much, but to cope, it starts to learn how to automatically dream small, right? But the other thing is being compassionate to yourself. that just because you thought you were interested in something, just because you put resources into it, if you genuinely don't care about it, but you don't want to look like you're a failure to people around you, so you stick to it, don't do that to yourself. Don't be a poor example to other people to do it too, like your children or your peers or whatever. Get real about, you're allowed to care about what you do and be passionate. And if you're not passionate and you can't find reasons to be passionate or address low confidence issues, if that's a real reason. And, I find that imagination is a big one too, because if your heart is not into something, there are so many ways that you can change it or see it, and so many ways you can innovate it, that you can actually reimagine it in a way where you can care again. Right? So that's always an option too. But say, to the best of your ability, you couldn't imagine a way that would interest you. You actually didn't have a confidence issue. It just did nothing for you. Give it up. Be proud of giving that up. Because where do you think your beautiful life force will be if you stop something that doesn't feed your heart? It will make room for something else that will exhilarate you, that will make you want to jump out of bed every day. So why would you keep yourself from things that truly matter because you want to make sure appearances are that you're an awesome citizen of a world that doesn't give up? That doesn't make sense. But unfortunately, a brain can do that to us. A brain can be wired into that convoluted state of doing things for valueless reasons, simply because survival is don't look weak, don't look like a failure, sacrifice everything not to look like that, because then the world will swallow you up or exploit you. So here we are, we're saying how to never give up on the things that truly matter. That's really the key. And therefore go all in. And you can afford to go all in because your approach to keep changing and refining and digging deeper and asking, why is this not working? And what else can I do differently? What else has someone else done differently? What can I Google? YouTube? Who is doing something similar? Who's achieved in remote similar areas that I could plug into? Who can I connect with that can guide me? Like, there's so many things we can do.
I always have your voice in my head, George, when you always talk about, the abundance in life of choices or opportunities and things like that. And often if I get too caught up in the day-to-day things that I do from work and training or studying, and my mind is so cluttered with things to do and racing through life, and I lose sight of thinking, the opposite of abundance, where there's lack and everything, and that sort of consumes me. And then that seems so real that there's a shortage of everything. Yeah. And then I always remember how you say about really we've got to change that perception about the shortage of things and connect to abundance, and how we can search for things in creative ways and being open to that.
Yeah. It's funny. A lot of clients say they put themselves into a situation where they'll say something like, what would George say or what would George do? But what's funny about that is they needed that trigger to realize they knew all along. Because just by framing it with me as the trigger, as a symbol, they actually gave themselves permission to access their own wisdom. So it's actually quite funny how we do that. But this abundance is, I think we should at some stage look at abundance on its own for a whole podcast, because it is one of the most evasive realities that we live amongst. Like, it must be strange to walk amongst nature that keeps replicating from seed to tree to thousands of seeds to, millions of trees and endless fruit. It must be strange for us to not see the relationship between nature's abundance and ours. And if you look at people in the world who were told it can't happen, you don't have the resources, and they turned around and they went, gosh, if I didn't need enough motivation, you doubting me, I even looked up to you, and now you're doubting me. I think everyone that's achieved something extraordinary, that's left some legacy on this planet, they have those stories, Rachel. Because there are endless people wanting to protect you from trying really hard and becoming disappointed. They don't want you to feel disappointed, Rachel. They really do care for you. So don't get your hopes up. Don't believe in something big, because you'll only realize it can't happen for you. Then you're going to feel awful. So how about I save you that and tell you not to bother? You won't get there. I swear, these people aren't doubting you most of the time. They're not doubting you because they want to hurt you. They're doubting you because they don't see a world that's abundant, and they don't see a world of changing your approach. So they look at your life through that narrow, blinkered range, that distorted lens. And all they see is a timeline you're on where you're going to be devastated. And then they talk with conviction that they need to protect you from your delusion that you're going to be successful in that or this or whatever you're going for. Now, I personally don't really get motivated by people who don't believe in me or what I'm doing. Why? Because proving them wrong doesn't actually give me any benefit. I know they're wrong. I don't need to prove to them they're wrong. But there was a time where I used to get really angry at people wanting not to believe in me and what I could achieve and what I was doing. Now I just see deeper than that. And I shared some of that perspective. So I only have compassion for people who don't see the possibilities, and you can have whatever you want. You just keep, refining, redefining your approach, what you're working on. But the fact is, power. You see, if you want to achieve anything in your life, you have to be powerful. But what is power? What is it? It's one thing: the ability to adapt in timely ways so that the version that wasn't delivering is undone, and the version that replaces it attracts exactly what it wants in resources. So it's like magic, right? Because we talk about, wow, if you're magical, you must be powerful, right? Power, magic. I don't see the abundance. I don't see the resources that are in front of me. Suddenly, I slip out of the emotional attachment to the frustration and therefore the belief that there's nothing. And I become curious as to how am I being self-deceived. I then go into an observer process of collecting data with no prejudice filters to contaminate that data. I therefore see the deception. The deception gives me the ability to go, oh, I believe that nonsense. No wonder I couldn't see the abundance there, or the way to go about it in this way that actually cost me no extra money or no extra. Actually, it's half the time. It's half the cost. How silly of me I didn't see that way of aligning ABC actions. So then I move into a version that sees it clearly. And then suddenly I have what I didn't have. That is power. And having $1 billion in your bank account could be seen as power, because you can throw money at something to wash away the problem, right? You can. But here's the irony of this. The person with $1 billion is going to lose that $1 billion if they have that attitude. You see, that's why people get confused by people who are extremely wealthy and their wealth keeps growing. It's because their attitude to wealth is different. You see, they see a problem and they're more interested in how to be clever about creating abundance in the process that keeps things thriving, not, oh, let me throw money at that to take the pain away or to solve the problem. Because the two things that are reflective of a lazy brain is time and money. You see, everyone says, and I'm dobbing my wife in with this because this is funny. She goes, I wish there was 2 of me. I wish there was 3 of me. And I said, you know, honey, what would happen if there was 2 or 3 of you? All 3 of you would be too busy wishing there was 3 each of you as well, because you say yes to too many things. You spread yourself too thin trying to help everyone in every way. And then those 9 will wish there was 3 each. And before you... So here's the thing. Time. If we wish we always had more time, more hours in a day, no. That robs the brain of innovation. And money, it's like, oh, I'll just throw money at that. Well, hang on a minute. Stop for a second. Look at it. Look at your existing resources. Can you realign something? Can you leverage something? Can you create a value that would make someone be a part of it? All those options are always there, but people are throwing money, and they're the ones where their money goes backwards. Meanwhile, the billionaires get richer. So it's not about the money. Isn't that interesting? So you know what that means? It goes back to power being the ability to adapt in a timely way from an approach that has no abundance to an approach that cracks it, that harnesses it. And that cycle of shifting out of an approach into one that works is never ending, is on offer from moment to moment. Our identity needs to be wrapped into the dynamic flow of it. And that's where our power turns on. So if you never want to give up, never give up on being that. And suddenly you won't have the issue of getting frustrated and drained because something's not working for so long and now your knees are getting weak and shaking and apparently you can't give up. And you're bruised, right? You're disillusioned, but you can't give up. And that same approach is not working. In other words, get less tolerant on an approach that's bruising and that draining, and start backing yourself on what's a different approach? What's a different approach in a timely way?
So in summary, because we've covered a lot, in summary, what do you feel is the main sort of message about giving up or not giving up?
Yeah, I think that the main thing is that if you're giving truly from your essence of flow to adapt and always be highly relevant in the moment, there'll be nothing to give up because everyone's all in with you because you're giving so much value. If we were to distill it down, it would be down to that, which basically means you're not really giving the best of you, and therefore you're caught in a dilemma of needing to give up altogether because the value wasn't there, and now you're going to change direction. Now you're going to turn to another partner or another business or something or another product, whatever it is. But be careful, because are you taking your blunt, non-adaptive approach there as well? That's it in a nutshell. Give up on an approach that isn't working, but never give up on the purpose of innovating to get the rewards of why you're in it in the first place. I'm glad you asked me to summarize.
Thanks, George. Oh, that's good. Yeah, no, that was amazing. We've covered it so much. Real, food for thought in there. Something I think it's worth re-listening to.
Yeah.
And I think we've mentioned a good couple of podcasts in there as well to refer on to for afterwards.
So, yeah, look, resilience is the key to everything, and that's where the power lives, and how to never give up.
Thank you for joining us on another EP7 podcast. If you liked what you heard, remember to share and subscribe so you're notified of every podcast released. If you have any questions or would like to connect with us, please jump on the EP7 official Facebook page. We'd love to hear from you.